What if I told you that there was once a book that laid out step by step how to achieve immortality? That's right, there was, and it's one of these ancient texts that man was never meant to read that we're going to cover today. Some of these texts contain knowledge that we will never actually receive because they are next to impossible to decipher, like the Voynich Manuscript and the Rohonc Codex. But one of these in particular gives us a speed run to summoning the dead, and another one gives us that step-by-step guide to immortality, so make sure you stick around for that one. I think we should start out with one of the most famous examples of an indecipherable text, the Voynich Manuscript. The Voynich Manuscript is an illustrated codex book created sometime during the 15th century, probably in Italy. It was probably created during the Renaissance period of Italy, and here's the thing, we have no idea who created it or what language it's even written in. It's either a completely lost to history old language, or it's one of the best ciphers of all time. Some of the greatest code breakers and cryptologists from history have studied this thing and still can't break it. Or it was a massive prank meant to keep us going on and on forever trying to figure out what it was, and it's literally just gibberish. The book has 234 pages divided into 6 sections: botany, astronomy, biology, cosmology, pharmaceutical, and recipes. We only know what sections these are because of the illustrations, because obviously we don't understand the words. But anyway, some of these drawings in this book are wild. The botany section alone has 113 drawings of plants and herbs and that kind of stuff. But let me tell you, that's the most normal thing in the entire book. Thing is, most of the other sections, especially the astronomy section, are absolutely chock full of drawings of naked women. You can look this book up for free online and look at it yourself, and you can tell that whoever was drawing these things was either a huge, massive fan of the female body, or they were feeling some type of way. Alright, so as I said, if nobody can crack the code, then it makes sense to trace back the book to who actually wrote it, right? Well, obviously you might think that it's somebody named Voynich because it's called the Voynich Manuscript, right? Well, you'd be wrong. Wilfrid Voynich was a Polish book dealer who bought this book in 1912. He would tour the world with this book. It would become his prized possession. Like, he would tell everybody that the black magic contained in this book from the medieval ages is far superior to modern science and engineering, all that kind of stuff. The problem with that statement is that even today, over 100 years after he's dead and gone, we still haven't figured out what it says at all. Well, he may not have been gone 100 years ago, but he was touring the world with this book 100 years ago. You get what I'm saying? The manuscript's first known owner was a man named George Beresh, who was an alchemist in Prague during the 17th century. So how it traveled from Beresh to Voynich and everywhere in between, we don't know how all that happened, but before Beresh, we also have no idea what happened. It's just like untraceable. Voynich himself believed the book to be the works of Roger Bacon, who was an English mathematician, scientist, and seemingly wizard. Like, everybody thought he was a wizard for some reason. Now, this guy lived in the 13th century, so this proved to be like a leading theory for a long time until carbon dating disproved the theory altogether. This manuscript was created during the 15th century, the pages, the writing, all of it. Roger Bacon lived in the 13th century. In my personal opinion, I think this thing might have been created for like a secret manuscript for a cult or something like that, a secret society to read and write, whatever, because nobody else can understand this language. So that's my guess, but no matter who wrote it, it wasn't meant to be read by the general population, and it still hasn't been to this day. What happens when you mix 4 ounces of blood from a black dog, 2 ounces of blood and brains from a pig, and 1 ounce of donkey brains? You get a medicine that will make someone hate you, according to the Picatrix. I think if somebody gave me that, I would hate them anyway. I don't think it would need to be a medicine, but anyway. The Picatrix is basically an ancient Arabic encyclopedia of magic. It contains ancient rituals and spells, medicines like that one, astrological and astronomical teachings, and just a whole host of other weird stuff. It is 400 pages long and written in either the 10th or 11th century, probably in Muslim Spain. It's said that it was written by a mathematician named Al-Majriti, but nobody really knows if that's the case or not. Alright, Picatrix itself translates into the aim of the sage or the goal of the wise, and it was translated as a whole from Arabic to Spanish during the 13th century. Aside from its wacky content, this thing is very unique because it pulls on the teachings from like Zoroaster and Aristotle and basically every other ancient religion you could ever think of. Hermes Trismegistus, literally everybody. It's a compilation and amalgamation of all these different religious rituals, all these different weird stuff that happened in the ancient world, so that makes it really cool to me. Back in the day that it was written, the powers that were thought this thing to be the most dangerous text of its time. Now, since it was translated into Latin right after it was translated into Spanish, the entirety of Europe took this thing and ran with it. It was greatly censored from the public's eye back then, and honestly, that's for good reason. Some of the rituals described in the book condone the use of like hard drugs like opium and hash, all that terrible stuff, even psychedelics, which that's not as bad, but Anyway, bad stuff. The implications of this book go all the way to like the Salem witch trials in America. So yeah, America has even been affected by the Picatrix. The takeaway from this is that if you really want to create talismans or perform rituals or speak to the dead, something like that, you should read this book. If not, you should probably stay away from it because you might accidentally curse your family for 7 generations or something like that. Just real quick, thank you a ton for watching. You have absolutely no idea how much it means to me. If you're enjoying this video, hit that subscribe button. It helps me out a lot. And now, let's get back into it. What happens when the fate of an entire nation rests on a collection of 9 prophecy books that are held by a greedy old lady? Well, you lose 6 of them because you're a cheapskate, that's what. The story of the Syballine Books dates back to pre-Republic, pre-Empire Rome. Back in those days, a Sibyl or oracle was a prophet lady that resided at the holy sites of the world, so like where they had shrines to Apollo, Zeus, stuff like that. These Syballine books were a collection of the schizo-esque prophecies that these women uttered whenever they were under the influence of the gods or whatever. The gods most likely being like psychedelics, but anyway. They were written in Greek hexameter and they were believed to hold like the salvation secrets of Rome whenever it needed it the most. Legend has it that Tarquinius, who was the last king of Rome, was offered this collection of 9 Syballine books for an outrageous price, but it was at a time when Rome might have needed them. Despite the fact that the entire ancient world believed these books to hold the secrets and knowledge to saving kingdoms and stuff like that, he declined the offer because it was an outrageous price. The old prophet lady that had just offered him 9 burned 3 of them and then asked for the same price for the remaining 6 books. He said no again, and she burned 3 more. She offered him the last 3 Syballine books for the same price as the original 9, and this time he relented and bought them. This should tell you how high in regards these books were held by the ancient world, especially in Rome. Now, while this may just be a story, all the knowledge that was collected in these 6 books that were burned was lost forever. Anyway, these 3 remaining books were said to be consulted during Rome's greatest times of need, since they were, containing the secrets of Apollo and every divine knowledge that they might possibly need. They were literally documented and still used by Rome up until 405 AD, whenever they were burned by a Roman general for some reason. I think they were being used against his forces, so he just burned them, but whatever, I don't care. That's before my time. No copies of these books have survived to this day, which they probably weren't real, or they were probably full of just a bunch of mumbo jumbo. But if these things somehow contained actual prophets and sayings from old gods, it's probably better if we don't have them today in the modern world anyway. If you've ever wondered if Egyptians have lore stories similar to Jews and Christians, yes they do. The Book of Thoth was an ancient Egyptian text that was supposedly written by the god of knowledge and writing himself, Thoth. This book was said to have contained limitless amounts of knowledge about stuff like magic, the laws of nature, and even the afterlife. It even supposedly contained a spell that would let you perceive and control the gods, and a spell that would let you talk to animals. Now for that story. An Egyptian prince went on a journey to find the Book of Thoth, and he found it at the bottom of the Nile, guarded by serpents. He fought these serpents and got the book, but in retaliation, the Egyptian gods killed his wife and child, and then he took his own life, and he was buried with the book. It's very sad. Many years and several generations later, another young prince goes to get the book from this guy's grave. He meets a woman that is so beautiful that she convinces him to take the lives of his own children. I don't know what kind of foolishness was going on back in ancient Egypt, but any woman trying to get me to kill my children is insane. Just saying. Anyway, this beautiful woman turned out to be the spirit of the first guy who died. He makes the current prince bury his wife and son, who the gods killed earlier, with him in his tomb, and then he makes him bury the book with him once again. The moral of this story is that the knowledge that was contained in the Book of Thoth was not meant for humans to have at all. So, was this book real? Well, yes, but not in the same form that this story says it was. There are many different ancient Egyptian texts attributed to Thoth because he was the god of writing. Several of these are collections of everything ancient Egyptian, like rituals that they used to bury the dead, pseudo-magical stuff, just weird stuff like that. A lot of Thoth stuff crosses over with Hermetic texts like Hermeticism, because Hermes and Thoth were thought to be the same being, and that created Hermes Trismegistus. And it's a whole rabbit hole you can go down. You can watch the Ancient World Mysteries iceberg, and it's on there, I promise. But yeah, just don't go look for the Book of Thoth. It's better off in that grave. The Ripley Scroll is a massive alchemical manuscript that's attributed to the famous alchemist George Ripley, but it's likely he didn't write it or draw it at all. George was a 15th century English alchemist that was very famous in his little weird niche corner of the world in alchemy. This scroll is an 18-foot long by 2-foot wide alchemical scroll that supposedly lays out the step-by-step formula to creating the Philosopher's Stone. Now, if you haven't seen Harry Potter, the Philosopher's Stone was a mythical compound that was said to be able to turn base metals into gold, as well as create an elixir of life. So yeah, 18 feet worth of scroll laying out the plan to make one of these things kind of makes sense if you have an elixir of immortality. I mean, that's fair. I'll try to throw some of these images on screen right now because this thing was just awesome. Like, the drawings are awesome. There's some crazy looking mythical beasts on there, some obscure representations of people and gods, and even some coded metaphors that we really can't decipher. We don't really know what they're trying to say there, but anyway. This scroll and all the replicas of it do not actually trace back to George Ripley, but they likely attached his name to the scroll so it could gain some credibility in that world. Now, who is this they that wanted the credibility for creating this thing, you may ask? We don't know. The scrolls were created and compiled during the 16th and 17th centuries, so long time after George himself passed away. One thing's for sure though, there's a bunch of Christian imagery on this thing, so it's very likely that whoever created this was influenced by the European religion of the time, which was obviously Catholicism, Christianity. Like so many of these other things that we're talking about today, it's likely that whoever created this knew that it would never be deciphered again unless it was just lost in translation somehow, but it really makes me think that most of these things might have been created as pranks to people in the future. Oh yeah, and you know how I said there's like replicas and different iterations of this thing? That's true. There's no two that are the same, so good luck deciphering the Ripley Scroll. If you ever wondered if ancient Christians, Muslims, and pagans could coexist, you might want to check out the Rohonc Codex. This is a manuscript donated to the Hungarian Academy of Sciences that is all but indecipherable except for the symbolism, which is Christian, Muslim, and pagan. It is 448 pages long and contains 792 characters that are used like an alphabet. These characters are probably used more like a syllabary, like these letters are used as syllables, something like that, because a lot of them aren't reused at all. Like certain syllables are reused a lot and others you just never see again. Like I said though, nobody can decipher it. That's one of these things that I don't understand. Like, now we have such advanced AI, I think we should be able to decipher some of these things, and maybe that's a thing that's going to come in the future. Maybe nobody's really put it in there yet and tried to figure it out. But anyway, stay tuned on that because I'm really curious to see if it happens. Now, there are tons of theories out there as to what language it's deciphered from, what old language it might be, and the theory that I like the most is that it was the old Hungarian script that it's kind of based on. This just makes the most sense to me because before it was donated to the Hungarian Academy of Sciences in 1838, it resided in a Hungarian library somewhere. This library that it was held in holds the only clue that we have as to what it might actually be. A catalog from 1743 from the same library collection reads, Hungarian Prayers in 1 volume size duodecimo. The size of this book is duodecimo, and we think the content might actually match. Remember that this thing is absolutely full of religious symbolism, and this thing's called the Hungarian Prayers all in one book, so it kind of matches. Now, the paper of this book dates back to 1530s Venice, but that could have just been when and where the paper was made, not actually anything to do with the writing of the book. Some people think that it's a specially coded book that we're not supposed to understand. Some think it could be an entirely new language, and some people think it's just gibberish, but let me know what you think down below. I still think that it's probably a book of Hungarian prayers because that just makes the most sense to me. The Gnostic Gospels are a set of early Christian texts that didn't make it into the Bible because they primarily preach Gnosticism instead of actual Christianity. These things were basically unknown from the 5th century up until 1945 when they were found in a library in Egypt. Gnosticism itself is more of like a philosophy-based belief system than an actual religion. They believe a warped version of Christian lore, like there are two gods, Jesus was not the savior, salvation is through gnosis or secret knowledge, and other stuff that's based on Christian lore but not exactly the same. Anyway, 52 of these Gnostic Gospels were found in the Nag Hammadi library in Egypt, and all of them were written in the Coptic language. The most interesting of all of these, in my opinion, is the Gospel of Judas. This book paints Judas as a hero instead of the greatest betrayer of all time. It's thought to have been written in the 2nd century, so probably around 100 years or so after Judas himself died. It was immediately rejected by the Christian church because of its principles of heresy. Once again, this book painted Jesus as a revealer of knowledge rather than a savior. He laughs at the other disciples and their misunderstandings of Jesus' role on earth, and he believes that Judas is his closest confidant and he's gonna use him later on. He literally uses him to betray him and then reveal knowledge. It goes into a whole bunch of weird stuff that we as Christians probably don't know anything about. Obviously, if you're not Christian, you probably know more about this than I do, but tell me about it below if you do. It's no wonder that the early Christian church dismissed this stuff, because I'm getting a little bit upset about it right now. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Now, I'd also like to mention the Gospel of Thomas. It also pushes this Gnosticism agenda, but it overlaps a lot with what actually does make it into the Christian Bible. Unlike the Gospels in the Bible and the Gospel of Judas, this book doesn't actually tell a cohesive story. It's a collection of 114 sayings, and actually 2/3 of them do overlap with Gospel canon. Now, just like the Book of Judas, it's very unlikely that this book was actually written by Thomas, because it was written far after his time. Alright, so I'm very glad that this book is not canon, because in that 1/3 that does not overlap with the actual canon of the Bible, some wild ideas are thrown out there. First of all, the crucifixion and resurrection of Christ are never mentioned in this book, but like I said, it's more of a book of sayings rather than a cohesive narrative, so I'll let that one slide. There are a few sayings that actually insert like Eastern thinking about gender bending and mysticism with lighting. It's really weird stuff. But anyway, let's talk about what's really crazy. The very last saying in this book is wild, and I'll read this to you right now. Simon Peter said to him, "Let Mary leave us, for women are not worthy of life." Jesus said, "I myself shall lead her in order to make her male, so that she too may become a living spirit resembling you males. For every woman who will make herself male will enter the kingdom of heaven." All right, that's a lot to unpack. If you take this content literally, you might as well take this book out back and burn it. If you examine it a little deeper, you can kind of tie the Gnostic philosophy to this. So like, they believe that femaleness represented the physical state of being, and male was like the spiritual state of being. So whenever you transition from the female to male state of being, you're kind of saved, whatever, because it was salvation. Is really weird stuff. Either way you look at it, it's pretty heretical to Christianity. If you like this kind of lore, I highly suggest that you go skim the Book of Thomas yourself, because it's really cool to see these kind of differences between our Gospels and the Gospel of Thomas. Speaking of checking things out for yourself, you ought to check out this video on screen right now. It's going to take you down a bunch of rabbit holes from the ancient world, just like this video did. Remember to like and subscribe. We're on a steady content grind now, and until next time, I'm going to be looking for the Book of Thoth, so hopefully that goes all right. Peace.